March 2012. Greece didn't default, at least that's what people were told. 200 billion vanished overnight. No vote, no warning. If you owned government bonds, this already happened to you. You just weren't told. They called it voluntary. And that word changed everything. Because once you learn this trick, a country can default without ever admitting it. This is the blueprint, and it's being used again. Pensions lost value overnight. Institutions accepted losses they never agreed to, and yet the word default was never used. That single word is the most important financial lie of the last decade, because once you accept it, you unlock a new kind of failure. A failure without panic, without headlines, without accountability. This was not chaos. This was design. Greece had become insolvent years earlier. By 2010, the math was already broken. Debt was unpayable. Growth was gone. But an official default would have triggered insurance payouts, bank failures, and legal consequences across Europe. So they needed a workaround. And they found one. They called it the Private Sector Involvement, PSI, a debt restructuring framed as cooperation. Bondholders were invited to participate. Losses were presented as shared sacrifice, and refusal was technically possible, but practically suicidal. Greece issued $206 billion in bonds. Private investors held most of it. In February 2012, they were given a choice. Accept a 53.5% haircut voluntarily, or face retroactive collective action clauses. KCs allow a majority to force losses on everyone, even those who voted no. Greece passed a law after the bonds were already issued. Contracts were rewritten after they were signed. This had never happened before. If 75% accepted, the remaining 25% were forced in. So investors had no real choice. Accept losses voluntarily or have them imposed anyway. 96% participated, not because they agreed, but because refusal was pointless. $107 billion vanished from private balance sheets. Insurance paid out only $2.5 billion. A rounding error. The trick wasn't the haircut. The trick was consent. There was no crash, no single moment you could point to, and the precedent was set. From that moment on, sovereign default had a new form. It could be silent, it could be legal, and it could be denied. No alarms go off. No one runs. Life continues, because this kind of default doesn't break systems. Losses don't appear. They dissolve. And by the time people notice, the window is already closed. That's why the word matters. Because language is what makes this possible. And once it works, it never disappears. It waits. Pension funds lost billions. Retirees saw savings cut in half. Banks nearly collapsed. The ECB had to step in with emergency loans. So taxpayers in Germany, France, and the Netherlands paid for losses they never voted for. The losses didn't disappear, they were relocated. In 2020, Italy followed the same path. Yields threatened to blow out. The ECB intervened. Maturities were extended, returns were lowered, adjusted for inflation, bondholders took losses. But it wasn't called default, it was called crisis management. Japan is running the same play. Yield curve control caps yields below inflation. Real returns are negative. Anyone holding Japanese government bonds is losing purchasing power every year. But again, it's not called default. Debt is higher than in 2012. Growth is weaker. Demographics are worse. Tolerance for pain is gone. Which means the next restructuring won't be announced as a crisis. It will be announced as a solution. You'll hear stability, order, coordination, and one morning, value will be gone. Nothing breaks. Nothing crashes. That's why people miss it. Because loss feels normal at first. Then it feels permanent. And by the time it feels real, it's already finished. Greece proved something dangerous. That a country can default without ever admitting it. That losses can be imposed without panic. That truth can be delayed. This isn't history, it's a blueprint. The next time you hear the word voluntary, listen carefully. Because default doesn't need to be declared, it just needs to be renamed. If you want more deep silent mechanics explained like this, hit subscribe and turn on notifications.